I'm Julie Bartke with this Senate update. Touching upon the declining walleye numbers in Mille Lacs Lake and a likely special legislative session, Governor Mark Dayton fielded a variety of questions from the media on Wednesday.
Well, I have very disappointed about the closure at Cliffs Natural Resources, and just as the MnTAC employees are being called back, this happened. So it just underscores the fragility of that industry right now, and hopefully we'll see it come back. I'm going up there on Friday before I meet in Mille Lacs. I'll go up there and meet with folks who are looking at layoffs there and see what we can do to be helpful. And as you know, we're having a meeting this afternoon with the Mille Lacs Tourism Council, and of press availability. After that, we have the same setup where if you want to go downstairs and wait us out, we'll have a press availability after that. The pool table and the Scrabble board will be available again, but give you a better update at that time. Questions?
Are you going to take up the sex offender program during the special session?
I want to hold this. Special session very quickly. Hopefully the week after next, or even end of next week. So the meeting on Monday the 10th, is a starting point with that. I don't rule anything out, but I don't expect there to be any action ready to be taken then.
Governor, newspapers have lost half the journalists that they had maybe 10 years ago. Will there be a special session for newspapers? I guess I'm being facetious, but my question is, businesses take risks. Is it always the state of Minnesota's job to cushion from those risks? There's lots of industries and lots of industries suffering.
Well, it's a valid question. In this case, you've got a lake, an iconic lake, and the whole area around it is suffering. And of course, up in the range you have industry. There are programs in place that will provide assistance to the workers being laid off by Cliffs. I mean, that's first of all, reaching out to them and demonstrating my concern, our concern. One of my axioms is go to trouble. That's always been my approach. Go, and this is when people paid their taxes, get hit hard, and they have a right to know that first of all, their government cares, and secondly, that there are programs in place that can be helpful on employment and health coverage alike. So it's really wanting to make sure that the people being affected know that they haven't been forgotten and that they get connected directly with the services programs that are available. Now, in case of Mille Lacs, where you've got a situation where there isn't really something in place because it hasn't been foreseen, then the question is, do we need to put something in place that will help them get through this unique situation? There aren't a lot of lakes in Minnesota, fortunately, that are basically devoid of fish, especially the fish upon which the whole industry up there, commercial tourism industry up there, has depended for all these years. So you've got people that are, when this happened at Leech Lake, every tourism-related business except for one collapsed. And we don't want it to have to happen again if we can possibly help it. So if there's again, my view is that government exists to serve the people, and that when people are through no fault of their own especially, are put in dire straits, that's when I want government to be as responsive as it can be. And we'll have a special session. I'll propose a ban on gill netting of journalists. That helps.
Governor, in terms of that, though, I mean, what are the mechanics of the legislation going to look like? I mean, how are you going to protect resort owners, et cetera?
Well, that's what the meeting today is intended to explore. What kind of assistance would be useful to them. What I've understood so far is that just working capital, just money to pay their employees with a drastic drop in revenues. It will become even worse if this walleye fishing closure needs to take effect next week. Possibly property tax abatements, additional money for tourism, advertising, and promotion. There's very good fishing on Mille Lacs right now for bass, for northern, for muskie, I'm told. Personally, I would trade every walleye ever destined to catch to have one big muskie. I mean, but different people have different preferences, and it was once within a decade ago called the largest natural walleye factory in the world. And 2012, the agreed upon limit was 500,000 pounds. This year, combined for the tribes and for the rest is 40,000, so less than 10%. So this drastic drop in the numbers of fish there is really an ecological crisis as well as a financial crisis. So,
but even your own research, I'm sorry to interrupt, but even your own researchers who look at global warming and climate change acknowledge that some of these lakes that are around the state of Minnesota may not be walleye lakes anymore, and this could potentially be one of them. And if you're propping up businesses that potentially could never be able to come back again, isn't that throwing money after a situation that's not going to be the same?
Well, it's not for me to judge whether this is fatal, and I to say people, well, sorry, climate change, you're obsolete now, and your business is just going to have to go out of business. Is not in a position I'm willing to take. I think that's totally premature and totally unwarranted at this point in time. I mean, Leech Lake was 10 years ago was in this situation, basically devoid of walleyes, and they stocked it over the legislature required it over the DNR's objections, and it's worked very well from all I'm told. They had a limit of 6 walleye per season per day, and now it's down to 4. But still a remarkable turnaround there. So I'm not willing to give up on either the lake or the businesses who depend upon the lake for their livelihood until we've made every effort. I intend to see that we make every effort over the next month's time, and do what we can for next season to get to. I don't know how long it takes for the fingerlings that are deposited in the lake with stocking, to grow into, mature fish. But so this is not going to be an immediate turnaround. But I think we owe it to the businesses there. We owe it to the state of Minnesota itself to make every effort to turn that lake around, as was also done with Red Lake. So we've had examples where an all-out effort has made a difference, and then it's largely sustainable on its own from that point forward.
Governor, if you're hoping to have this special session as early as the end of next week, what logistically has to happen between now and then?
Well, we have to agree with the working group of the legislators, which we're going to set up for this week. We have to get an agreement on what the package would look like, the scope, the amount of the package, and then we have to get a prior agreement with the 4 legislative leaders, myself, that it's going to be limited to these particular areas. I mean, I'd say the end of next week is extremely optimistic. But the sooner we can get a working capital loan program in place for people, the sooner we can give them the financial assistance they're going to need to pay their staff and basically to continue to keep operating during this time. For now, until the end of Labor Day is really, that's their peak season, the summer. So their expenses are at max in terms of people that they're employing and supplies and everything else. And hopefully they can get some forbearance from their lending institutions. And if the lending institutions know that we're going to be providing this working capital, which then in turn could be used in part to pay off whatever loans they make, I think the goal is to get them through this through Labor Day, and then the season slacks off anyway until the ice is on the lake, and they can there's winter sports and ice fishing the lake. So I'll learn more today about the economics and the cash flow needs, but that's sort of the idea. That's the reason we need to get the special sessions as soon as practical. But I think it'd be it's unrealistic to think we can get it done by the end of next week. We can also give legislators notice or have plans to be all over everywhere, vacations and everything else. So realistically, the following week or even the week after. But I'd like to do it as soon as possible.
In the event of these working capital or no interest loans, if the borrowers don't repay the state, would there be liens and foreclosure?
We haven't gotten into that yet. I don't know these loans, as for example the turkey growers. I don't know what the collateral requirements are, and you usually make these loans in conjunction with private lenders, so I don't know what those requirements are as well. But that's certainly one consideration, but I don't think this. No, I can't answer that definitively now.
Governor, obviously you're still learning specifics, but what in your mind is an appropriate amount of public money to devote to supporting up this troubled region, and what would your thoughts be on how much that should be direct aid versus loans that the state would have some expectation of getting paid back?
Well, recently with the turkey growers, we have provided no interest loans, low interest loans. So I think loans is the appropriate way to go. If you have a grant program, certainly everybody's going to apply for that. At our meeting yesterday, they've identified. DEED has identified 106. Actually, the Department of Revenue had made this identification. 106 resorts in that immediate vicinity of Mille Lacs, and the majority of them are annual revenues less than $500,000. So, if you were to say, and I don't think you'd get 100% participation, but if you had 100 resorts and you provided low or no interest loans up to $100,000 a piece, that would be $10 million. So, in the scheme of things, especially given the state's current budget surplus, it's not an inordinate amount of money. And then tourism, advertising, promotion, possibly $100,000 or $200,000 to, again, communicate to people that the lake is open, that there are a lot of other terrific activities in the area. But that's just really ballpark at this point.
Governor, will the same type of assistance be offered to the Brainerd Lakes area resorts?
Well, the Brainerd area is a different situation because we have a disaster relief program which the legislature put in place 2 years ago and modified this year. So we're fortunate to have that already in place. That's more for the public infrastructure and the lake, which is there's some, most of the resorts in that area, especially the Maddens and the Kavanaughs and the like, have private insurance to cover, their situations. And of course, their scope of operations is such that the financial needs would be significantly greater. So at this point, I would look to that existing program, the disaster relief, in terms of the public infrastructure needs that will also benefit those private operations, and then the MnDOT's assessing what it needs to do additional road repairs and the like. And the Pillsbury Forest toured over with a helicopter is DNR's purview, and they may need some additional funding to go in and do additional accelerated cleanup in that area. But that doesn't affect the operation of the resorts and the like in that area directly. So we'll have a chance to still, in sort of a more traditional way of an area affected by a natural disaster, where HSEM, Homeland Security, Emergency Management folks are drawing in the tabulations on the financial damage that occurred there. I don't know whether it's going to qualify for a federal disaster declaration or not, but it will certainly qualify for the state support, so we'll be able to step in on that basis.
Governor Dayton, this may be more of a federal issue, but one of our fellow Minnesotans has made international news by the taking of a lion in Zimbabwe. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's horrible, just horrible. It's an iconic lion, and to lure the animal out of the preserve and then You know, it's just, I don't understand how anybody thinks that's sport, or that I just think it's horrible.
Governor, regarding the Mille Lacs, a lot of folks there in Mille Lacs blame the Indian treaties for the lack of walleye in the lake, and that it's been overfished by the Indians and mismanaged by the DNR. Are you going to address those issues with these folks?
I will in time, but you know, right now the priority is, especially in terms of the special session, is to do what we can do to provide immediate assistance. You know, the limit 2012 was 500,000 pounds of walleye, and this year the total allocated to the tribe and to everyone else is 40,000, you know, less than 10%. And the tribe's share this year was 12,500 pounds. So even if you'd had no harvesting of fish by the tribes, you know, you're still looking at again, about 8% of what it was 3 years ago, which shows how drastically the fish population has fallen. And that's not attributable to the fish harvesting by the tribes. I mean, I know it's a very, very sore point of contention, and I have my own personal feelings about it, but the United States Supreme Court made a ruling, and we live under the ruling of the United States Supreme Court and the law that was, and the agreements that have been carried out pursuant to that, and I don't think it's going to move anybody right now to be putting blame there. In terms of the DNR, I have very, very serious concerns about the way it's been managed there. I'm not a scientist or biologist or an expert on the fishing part, but and I'll learn more today. But I've heard consistently about the what people up there feel is a disrespect from DNR officials in that area, and the disregard for their concerns. And as they say, the answer is always no, 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 no. And I think we need to all pull together now and try some things that have been resisted before, and see that we're all in this together. And the tribes, as well as the resorters and others there. I mean, everybody's affected by this, you know, drastic situation regarding the walleye population. And we, rather than pointing fingers, we need to be pulling together and seeing what we can do to turn this situation around.
Well, you've indicated you would direct or somehow aggressively encourage the DNR to restock the lake, which the folks in Mille Lacs say won't help because it's been overfished.
Well, I'm not an expert, but if it's, I don't know that if this year's harvest is 40,000, then the harvest in 2012 was 500,000 pounds, and prior to that, the policy, the DNR policy, was to permit 25% of the fish over, I think it's 14 inches. So I mean, you could say if the lake has been overfished, you can't attribute a percentage of that to the tribal activity. I think what's most problematic about the tribes, and they have again the legal right to do this, is the netting that occurs during spawning season. And you got 8 tribes. You're going to have to agree to whatever is going to be the policy going forward. But I intend to bring that up with them, because I think it's very destructive to the relationships that they have with people who can't fish at all during that time, and then also see the netting that's going on in spawning areas.
Well, could and should that treaty be renegotiated? Could it be renegotiated on the nets, for example?
Well, it's a treaty as interpreted by the U.S. Supreme Court that was negotiated in 1837, so I don't think the probability of being able to go back to
years trying to do this, trying to work out a deal. Would you be open to that?
I'm not going to say that at this point. I mean, you're not going to get the U.S. Supreme Court is not like the Minnesota legislature. You don't revisit the issues every year, and I think we're going to have to. I'm not going to comment any further on that, but we're within parameters that have been adjudicated and established, and like them or not, they're a fact of life, and let's see what we can do over time. And I'm certainly going to engage over the next months ahead to see what we can possibly accomplish in this whole area.
How quickly does the state need to step in and do something to impact the walleye population, or else risk, coming back here in the same situation in 2016?
Well, again, I'm not an expert. I don't know if you were to start stocking the lake. I assume that's done in the spring. And how long it takes if you put fingerlings, the very small fish in, I mean, the loss ratio of that's pretty high, with the other fish feeding on them. So, I mean, I don't know how long, and obviously it takes a couple of years for them to grow to some kind of maturity. But, Leech Lake went from basically, fished out, and Frank Moe, former state representative, has been talking to us about the fact that he lost his business, and every business but one bordering Leech Lake was, went out of business because of the drastic situation there. And now within a decade they're back to more normal fishing regulations, which I assume is a more normal quantity of fish that the legislature in 2007, 2008, mandated. He mandated the number of fingerlings that would be put into the lake to stock it over DNR's opposition, and it turned out to be very successful. I think we should use that as a model, and whether it requires legislation or requires requiring it, or a combination of the two. I mean, I intend to, bring together a group of people with expertise, including people in that area, and the tribe and everyone else, and talk about what do we need to do to repopulate the lake, and what do we do to enhance the growth of that population. 10 years or so, 15 years ago, I read once Mille Lacs is the greatest natural walleye factory in the world, and it was fished that way. And now, for whatever combination of reasons, and the lake is clearer, and there are crayfish, and there are cormorants, and there, there are probably a variety of factors. It's not exactly apropos, but when the tragedy of Paul Wellstone's accident occurred, I met with the National Transportation Safety Board a couple of times to understand, and they said that there's seldom a single factor that causes a plane crash, a catastrophe like that. It's usually a combination of factors, and often in interrelationship. So I'm just, again, not an expert, but I'm guesstimating this is not a single culprit or a single reason. It's a combination of factors that have interacted with one another to cause this precipitous decline in the walleye population.
To clarify, do some considerations of the lake's walleye population and some legislative action need to be taken during a special session?
I don't rule that out, but I don't rule that out. We'll have to see, but we'll move rapidly, and if it does require legislation, we'll get that ready for the session.
Has anyone indicated to you that the take of walleye next year or the year after will diminish further approaching zero?
I don't think they've gotten to that point in their negotiations. The season, or the year, starts December 1st because it covers the winter ice fishing. So they would normally be in the process this fall of determining that based on the evaluation of the number of fish in the lake. Again, that still lies ahead.
The DNR says that there's plenty of spawning going on. There's plenty of baby walleye. They're just not making it to H3. So it makes you, the resort owners don't buy that. So I don't know if part of that is just anti-tribal sentiment, or what it is.
Well, I don't know if that's tribal. I think it's anti-DNR. There's a serious issue of mistrust between the people up there and the DNR, and that concerns me greatly, because the DNR exists to serve the people of Minnesota, and Mille Lacs, first and foremost, people whose lives and livelihood depend upon that lake. And there are limits to what DNR could do, and there can be honest disagreements about what it should do. But the fact that no one trusts, or actually no one, the fact that there's such serious mistrust toward the people that represent DNR in that area is a very, very serious concern of mine.
Governor, do you feel like you need to do anything regarding the cliffs layouts in this, or in the special session, or do you think that they're protected under the legislation?
Well, I spoke last night with Cliff CEO Lorenzo Gonzalez, who very, courteously called me to inform me of what they were announcing today, and this is hopefully temporary, but any layoff is too long, and we'll be following up, with him and see what they can do. But in this case, again, there are existing programs in terms of unemployment, in terms of continuation of health care and the like. I'm going to go up to the range on Friday before Mille Lacs and meet with some of the workers and their leaders up there and find out how they view the situation, what can be done. But the CEO is very, very concerned and very much desirous of bringing them back. He just said we've been producing too many pellets and we don't have the market for them, especially and ironically with Mintac coming back, that increases the oversupply overall. So it's a very fragile industry right now, and the prices as low as they are. But he's very committed to Minnesota. He's very committed to returning that plant to its current level of employment, to actually expanding their scope of their operations in Minnesota. As he said, they'll use the layoff to retool the plant so it has a better ability to meet the needs of the future. And so, he's very much committed to Minnesota. He's not walking away from Minnesota at all.
So forgive me for this, but are they idling the entire plant? Everyone is?
It's my understanding that they are, yeah.